the Land Use Advisory Committee meeting to order for July 17th. We got the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. We got a lot of stuff, a lot of information items, so we're not going to read it this time. Before we do the approval of the agenda, I did want to introduce our new committee member, Christos Jensen, District 16. Jensen, right? Great. Yep. Sorry. If you want to just introduce yourself really quick. Last month we did introductions all around, but if you want to introduce yourself so everyone gets to know you a little bit, where you're from, position, if you're elected official or not.
Sure. Well, thank you. I'm very glad to be here. I'm from District 15, so I live in Egan, and this is my first meeting. I have served on our Egan Advisory Planning Commission for the last 7 years. I'm the current chair. I've been the chair for the last several years too. I actually know Angela through her work on the Egan Advisory Planning Commission when I was brand new. She really helped me understand anything that was going on in that commission when I started. And I have, through that role, really become very passionate about land use and development in the city. I think that my council is a pretty incredible place, and we're very fortunate to be here. In my job, I'm a manager at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, so just 3 blocks away from here. I am in our Human Services Legal Department, where I co-oversee our child protection, civil commitments, and child support units, although I've done everything that we do in our office. That's where I'm at right now. And I've got 2 young kids, 8 and 6, and love to enjoy the parks and recreation all over the cities as well. So thanks very much for having me.
Thank you, Christos. And one thing you'll see is we tend not to have very formal meetings when we're having information items. We want people to have the discussions, interact, bring in their input from their areas. When it comes time to voting, then we will just go through the chair to make sure we get through on time. We want to respect everybody's time for coming in. And we want to make sure we're done by 6 so everyone has enough time to go home, play with their kids, and enjoy the weather. All right, and moving on, everyone's had a chance to go over the agenda. Any changes, modifications? None? Everyone's good with that? All right. And also we'll be looking for approval of the May 15, 2025 Land Use Advisory Committee minutes. So moved by Glisky. Second? Second by Kathy. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Minutes have been approved. Up first, we're going to have the 2025 Regional Economic Framework update from Mayor Clapp-Smith. I'll let you take over.
All right, terrific. So I think magically my presentation will appear here. There we go. Hello, I'm Mayor Clapp-Smith, happy to be here today. And I'm going to be telling you about the Council's work to update the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, which we call the SEDS for short. Our project team lead, Barish Mastaz, is out of town and asked me to present on her behalf. I want to acknowledge Todd Graham, who's in the room, who is also a member of our team. So today I'll describe what a SEDS is, how it relates to Imagine 2050, what we are doing to update it, and then we'll engage with some questions about our regional and local economies. A SEDS is a document and a process conducted under guidance from the U.S. Economic Development Administration. The U.S. EDA requires that SEDS plans be prepared by regional entities in order to qualify for EDA grants and technical assistance. A SEDS planning document informs a region's economic development efforts. Up until 2020, the 7-county metro did not qualify for EDA funding because it did not have a SEDS for the region. So the council and its partners co-led an effort to produce the metro's first SEDS, which was adopted by the council in 2020. More than just a requirement, the document lays out a collective vision for the region's economic development. It also includes kind of a broad scan of economic initiatives that are occurring. So under the guidance from the US EDA, a SEDS document has to have 5 components. It starts with kind of an overview of the state of the regional economy, and specifically kind of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's supposed to talk about the priorities for the region's economy and then identify strategies and actions that partners in a region have determined need to be focused on to improve and strengthen the economy. It has to include an implementation and evaluation framework, so what does success look like if we improve the regional economy? And finally, it has to have a section on economic resilience. So these are ways the economy would respond to unanticipated shocks, which could be the loss of a major employer, a wildfire, things like that. In 2020, the region adopted its first SEDS, which at that time we called the Regional Economic Framework. So the 2020 overview, or REF, was developed collectively between the Met Council, Greater MSP, and the Center for Economic Inclusion, and we had some support from the McKnight Foundation. As I mentioned, it was formally adopted by the Council in 2020, and it has served as the strategy since that time. And since it was adopted, there have been a number of grants that have come to the region because this document was in place. So the Imagine 2050 now is setting the stage for us to update our SEDS for 2025. So under EDA requirements, in order to stay eligible for funding, you have to update these documents every 5 years. If they lapse, then you are no longer eligible until you do have it updated. So looking at Imagine 2050, the 5 regional goals we've identified are compatible and consistent with themes and priorities that were identified in the 2020 SEDS and that are being carried forward for the 2025 update. The narrative that describes the goal around the region as dynamic and resilient closely aligns with the topics and data that we'll address in the 2025 update. So if you haven't had an opportunity to read that part of Imagine 2050, it'll give you a really good preview of what to expect to see in the SEDS update. Specifically, Imagine 2050 describes economic factors that influence council policy and identifies regional economic strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which are a required element of a SEDS document. So in preparation for the 2025 update, council staff have consulted with our Midwest region EDA representative. We spoke with him just a few weeks ago about recent changes to federal guidance for SEDS content. So the EDA has removed a previous requirement it had to address climate impacts and resiliency planning in the SEDS documents. But that was one of the priorities that had been identified as important to the region last time. He said, it's still fine to address priorities that might be climate, racial inclusion, things that we had previously if they're important to the region. What the US EDA is looking for is they just want to make sure we are hitting their minimum requirements. He did not feel that they're saying that there are certain topics they don't want addressed in the update. So the US EDA emphasizes that the creation of these documents should be an active collaboration that engages a variety of stakeholders from around the region. So for this update, we're doing engagement in 3 ways. One, we're doing it through a committee, and that is typically a required step for the update. We are going to be conducting 18 one-on-one interviews with kind of experts in different parts of the regional economy. And then when we have a draft ready to go, we will be having a public hearing and inviting comments. So as I mentioned, a key part of the collaborative engagement we do is through the SEDS committee, convening stakeholders from around the region to talk about trends, priorities, and strategies. This is a list of the 26 participating organizations we have on the committee. And if you look at this list, you'll see it's a mix of public, private and nonprofit sectors, as well as educational institutions and utilities. As part of the 2020 SEDS process, there was extensive outreach to regional stakeholders, and a lot of this has gone through activities hosted by Greater MSP that identified 9 strategic priorities. You see those 9 priorities identified in the boxes here. We are advancing those same 9 priorities for the 2025 update. But we are refreshing the information, kind of what is the state of things related to this priority, what are the strategies we want to use to address them, and how would we go about implementing that. So what I would like to do now is take a moment to engage all of you a little bit around these 9 priorities with a couple of questions. So this is where I'm going to try to execute something that I consider tricky because I'm not very tech savvy. I'm going to do a Mentimeter survey exercise. Hopefully a lot of you have done these before. So you have 2 ways that you can participate in this survey that we'll do live. One is you can take your phone and you can scan the QR code here that you see on the screen. If there are any of you that don't have a phone or are more comfortable, you can use the iPads that are on the table. They should already be set up for the Menti website, and you enter the code that you see on the screen, 92406173. So I'm going to wait for you to say that you're kind of feeling ready to go. Oh, Todd's going to join us too.
Making sure it
works. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That's what team members do for each other. All right, have you found your way to the survey? Okay, so here's where I'm going to try to do the tricky part and move over myself to run the survey. So it looks like some of you have started perhaps on the first question, which is, these are going to be 2 slides. I've taken the 9 priorities, and on the first slide I ask about the first 5 priorities. And the question is, are these priorities still important, and how important? A 1 means it's not important, and a 5 means it's very important. So it looks like we have about 15 of you logged in, and we'll kind of wait. Oh, you are not seeing my screen right now. Okay, what was supposed to happen is you were supposed to see a live version of this, of whatever's on my screen. So I'm probably just going to have to tell you what the results are coming in at. So a couple more to answer on the first question. Sean, we're going to get tech in here and say if they can help us show the live results. So what we're showing so far as the results are coming in for these priorities is we have workforce and skills is the item that's being identified as the most important among these, followed by talent migration and retention, then by job growth. In 4th place is regional brand and image, and then racial inclusion is kind of in 5th. So I'm going to go ahead to the next one.
Barrett,
Yeah.
if I hit escape on your computer and pull it up.
You gotta go back to the PowerPoint, then hit escape, and then you can go to the website.
I'm going to have to go back on the PowerPoint then. Okay. All right.
Look at that.
Wow, thank you.
She goes, look at me.
Okay.
My grandkids getting so
Yeah,
proud.
I know. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna go back just quickly here. So you can see the results from the first question. Kind of, so workforce and skills, definitely a strong lead for that. So second question, which of these priorities are still important? How important? Looks like most of you are answered here. Affordability in front, followed by startups and innovation. Then transportation and mobility, and finally the new climate economy. All right. So in the next questions, these are word clouds, and this will be kind of replaced by what you are adding here. It looks like maybe 3 people have already been putting in words. So think of single words that describe kind of the strength of your local economy. So I'm asking you now to kind of not think regionally, but for the place you live, the place you are elected official. What do you see as words that describe the strengths of your local economy? And I think each of you can do up to 3 words. Just give it another 10 seconds or so. I'm always the person trying to figure out how to type my word in, so I want to respect that. All right. So it looks like so these word clouds, I'm sorry, if you haven't seen them before, if there are words that are repeated, it will tend to make those larger. So that you can see kind of the themes jumping out with the larger words. So here we see growth, entrepreneurship, diversity, resources, affordability. These are some of the themes rising to the top. So in the next one here, we're doing the same thing, but the question is, what are the weaknesses of your local economy? Okay, who's putting a laughing face emoji? That's not you, is it, Todd?
No, I'm not participating.
That wasn't me.
He's like, it wasn't me.
I think this person's saying they have no weaknesses, it's just laughing.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's pizza. Maybe we have some online.
Winter, that's interesting. All right, let's wait a couple more. Does anybody that said transportation want to say something about why they identified transportation as a weakness?
I'll
Yeah.
offer my 2 cents. So I live in Minneapolis, but I work in Plymouth, and it normally takes me 20 minutes to drive there, but for me to bus there, my car was broken down earlier this week, it was an hour 20. So I was just thinking about all the talent that City Plymouth or vice versa City Minneapolis are missing out on just because people can't get there.
Okay. Workforce, anyone on workforce? How is workforce a weakness for a local economy?
If you don't have the actual workforce in your area, certain end users won't be coming into your area to build out. Like if it's a medical district and you don't have the right people in that area, or the right housing, or the right transportation, it closes a lot of doors.
Yep, okay, good. All right, well, we will, we'll collect this information. We're gonna add it into the engagement we've been doing for the SEDS update. And we'll be sure we get these results back to you as well. So I'm gonna close out my window. Hopefully do this correctly. And then I'm gonna attempt to go back to my slides and see if this is still gonna work. All right. So, okay. So thank you for participating in this now. As I said, as we move towards the drafting stage of the 2025 SEDS update, we are going to be having a public hearing. So we will release the draft for public comment and input. We will make revisions to the final document based on that input. So if you know anyone that's interested in learning more, even before the public hearing process, please just let us know. The timeline for this is shown here. In March, we hired the University of Minnesota Extension team to support us in this effort. And Chair Charlie Zilli invited people to participate in the committee in April. We started our meetings, which we're doing monthly from May to September. So we're having 5 meetings with our committee. We'll produce the draft, shooting for October, release it for public hearing, and then we have a goal of adopting the updated document by early next year. So with that, I want to thank you. Again, if you want to learn more yourself or you know others who'd like to learn more, we have a SEDS Project website. This is the information, the links to look it up, but it's also just very easy. If you Google Met Council SEDS, you will be able to find the information for it. So with that, I'd like to conclude and just ask if anybody has any questions.
I did have one. What role do we play when it comes to the SEDS?
You mean beyond kind of leading the update of the document itself?
Do we approve anything? Do we?
The council, this is what a lot of people find most interesting. Generally, the US EDA is looking for public regional entities to be the organizations that lead the update of these documents, and they need to formally adopt them. And it's the formal adoption of them that then makes them eligible for funding. So we have asked in the past, along with other partners, well, does it make more sense, say, for Greater MSP to be leading this effort, and they adopt it? And what we've been told by our EDA representative is we really like it to be a public agency, and the Met Council for our region is that entity. So, but there's so many other partners. I mean, we're not specialists in economic development the way so many other people in our region are, and so we really just see ourselves in a convening role to try to pull people together to have the conversations.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Do we know what's happened to funding for these grants?
We did ask our representative that when we talked to him a few weeks ago. He said there is still funding available. You know, they don't know how the picture is going to be changing in upcoming months. I mean, so many things are changing, and not even federal staff often don't know what's coming down the pipe. But he said as of this time, they still have some money that they're making available.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna clarify your question, Chair. Were you asking about the Met Council's role or the LUAC's role?
LUAC specifically.
Oh,
Because I wasn't sure that the answer
yes.
sensed that difference.
Thank you, and I'll take a step. We think this is a really important, thing that the Met Council is working on. We want to make sure that you're familiar with it, understand it, particularly as it's moving into the public hearing phase. Also, that if you have interest in it and want to learn more, or talk to people in your own communities about it, that you have that opportunity. And it was just even doing a little bit of exercise we did here today. It's important to just keep talking to folks about what they're seeing as priorities, strengths, weaknesses. I don't know, Angela, if you have anything to add to that.
No, that's good.
Okay. So, thank you.
Go ahead.
I had a similar question about federal funding, and I guess the risk of it. Are we doing anything to prepare or do risk mitigation? Like, what if it changes? We still have the objective of the outcomes we're shooting for, but how have you thought about how you proceed without the funding to say?
Right, it's a great question. I think one thing our EDA representative has emphasized is he feels like He would like to see more applicants coming from this region for the monies they have available. And so grants have come into the region, but not, I think we need to do a better job of spreading awareness that this region now does have a SADS and that it's opened up funding opportunities that weren't there in the past. So it may be that there is some loss of funding opportunity, but I think increasing awareness, if we have more people making applications, maybe that'll help. USC EDA has traditionally been very heavy in funding kind of infrastructure improvements to help regional economies, and I would imagine that might continue to be an interest. You know, even with change of administration, infrastructure always seems like something that people stay excited about funding, but we'll see.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you. I'm supposed to unplug and then the other stuff up here. We'll see if it's actually.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Once it comes up next we have the Comprehensive Planning Technical Assistance Program overview with Angela and Emma Morat. Once it comes up.
Yeah, we're gonna cross our fingers. But in the meantime, I'll just say good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm Angela Torres, I'm the Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance. I'm here with Emma Dvorak, who is a sector representative and the project manager for one of the major projects that we're undertaking right now. We'll just get started. Well, maybe. Greg, you might have to advance the slides. This isn't working. Hey, there you go. I don't know if that was Greg or me, so we'll see. Today we wanted to give you an overview of the many ways that the council is getting ready for the upcoming 2050 comprehensive planning process. We understand that it's a heavy lift for local governments, and we want to make that as easy as possible where we can. It's a process that only happens once every 10 years, and so we want to try and help as best we can. One of the biggest pieces of this, as I mentioned, is a big project called the Local Planning Handbook. And we'll even give a live demo today of one of the planning tools that's under development as well. Oh, look at that. Okay. I couldn't talk about the whole suite of technical assistance programs and tools that we have without starting with the sector representative program. It's one of the most important and visible programs that we have. Right now we have 7 people that kind of are on the map that we call sector representatives, and they cover specific districts similar to council members throughout the region. So we cover all 16 districts. Sector representatives are all experienced local planners, knowledgeable and experienced with not only the council but its various programs and policies. We are the key contact for local governments with and for the council. We also provide technical assistance to our council members when they ask us for help too. But we provide planning and technical assistance, and we develop close working relationships with local planners all throughout the region. The planners on the local planning assistance team also led the development of regional land use policy, as well as cross-divisional work to develop the regional goals for climate, natural systems, and equity. We're also developing some internal process improvements. So a training program for all technical reviewers to prepare for the comp plan review process. And because this is a many years project, also planning to offer periodic refreshers, and as new staff come on board, doing a better job of onboarding them to the technical review process as well. We already have updated many of our internal resources to help with that onboarding and training initially as technical reviewers, but this will help us focus specifically on the comp plan updates process and how we respond to the comp plans that are submitted to us, how we consolidate comments, and how we provide consistency for local governments. So the goals here address several concerns that we heard from local governments during the 2040 planning process. They want consistency between and across the technical reviewers' comments, and consistency in application of council policy, a better understanding behind decisions, and better communication overall, and we can do that. This is just one way that we're trying to meet those needs. Met Council staff are also initiating review and analysis if needed to address updates to several of our programs and administrative guidelines. This would include the plat monitoring program, which many of our communities use to help with their meeting density requirements, as well as various guidelines that implement land use and other density requirements. We'll further develop and update the process for the preliminary plan review process, identify what that timeline and process is, as well as review and update the overall comp plan review process. Just looking for opportunities to streamline and increase efficiencies where we can, so that local governments, as they're working with us, have a better experience. I'm gonna turn over to Emma now for the bulk of our presentation.
Thank you. My name is Emma Dvorak. I'm a senior planner and local planning assistant and project manager for the Local Planning Handbook 2050 update. I'm supported in that role by staff from all over the council, including communications, information services, research, and environmental services, just to name a few. So the Local Planning Handbook is a one-stop shop online resource for local communities to access tools, data, and resources that will help them to build out their comprehensive plans. The Local Planning Handbook provides important community-specific information, data, and resources for local governments, such as growth forecasts, affordable housing need requirements, sewer allocation projections, and several of the required maps. It also supplies an individualized checklist that is unique to each community and helps them identify and track their progress as they write their comp plans. The Local Planning Handbook is undergoing a complete update to align with Imagine 2050 and is scheduled for launch in August 2025. The handbook project kicked off in fall of 2024. The team began by evaluating how local planners use and experience the current version of the website. Staff utilized the findings from the 2040 debrief to understand what worked well for local planning communities and what areas of improvement had already been identified. With the help of CD Research, the Local Planning Handbook team was able to observe and record local planners as they completed various activities and tasks on the site. And in addition to those task-based observations, we did interviews we interviewed users about their work, environment, and the preferences and the most valuable resources that they had on the site to further inform improvements. There are a few key areas of the Local Planning Handbook. One of them is the plan element pages, which serve as a landing page for each required chapter, such as land use, transportation, or wastewater. Plan element pages contain the minimum requirements for each plan element area, as well as resources or information on how to complete those requirements. Based on feedback from local planners, Met Council staff realized that while a variety of resources and guides were available on the Local Planning Handbook site, users often struggled to locate that information, were unaware of certain tools, or how to use them. This highlighted an opportunity for the council to make resources easier to access and more visible throughout the planning process. One of the ways that we are achieving this is by creating an interactive table on the website, which you can see here, that allows users not only to explore the minimum requirements by community or certain topic areas, but also immediately see what resources are available to them or what support is available to help them achieve their requirements. Whether it's a tool or a fact sheet or a guide, you'll find it here on the plan element page. When the website launches at the end of August, these pages will be populated with resources intended to help communities achieve the minimum requirements. In addition to toolkits for climate, natural systems, and housing that we are highlighting later in this conversation, there will also be several guides and fact sheets, including a comprehensive step-by-step guide to meet the water supply requirements. Transportation will be launching an interactive mapping tool that will be a great resource to help communities complete the goals achieved that are set out by the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan. Plan element pages also contain information about how communities can get more out of their plan going beyond the minimum requirements. Similarly, this area will also be filled out with tools and resources to help communities maximize their comprehensive plans. Another key element of the local planning handbook are the community pages. Through community pages, local planning staff are connected to information that is specific and tailored to them. Each community page, all 188 of them, contain individualized forecast data, the community system statement, and a complete unique checklist of minimum requirements and maps that are specific to and centered on each community. Based on user feedback, we have reorganized the content of community pages so that local staff are able to easily locate the information they need to get started on their comprehensive plans. We also made all maps and tables downloadable with one click and added a regional map feature that allows communities to view their data in context with the systems around them. The minimum requirements checklist is among the most critical resources that communities will encounter on the local planning handbook. The language of minimum requirements is often very technical and specific, and it is important that communities have a clear understanding of what is being asked of them. To evaluate the clarity and accessibility of the minimum requirements, local planning assistants convened 2 cohorts, one for developed communities and another for developing communities. These cohorts were comprised of planning professionals in the region with a mix of new and experienced planners. Participants shared their experience utilizing the minimum requirements checklist from the 2040 planning cycle and also had the opportunity to review and comment on the draft Imagine 2050 minimum requirements checklist. These discussions helped ensure that new requirements were aligned with Imagine 2050 regional goals, as well as, and also that they were clear to communities and that any gaps in available tools and resources were identified. I'm now going to give an overview of a few of the tools that will be available on the site, and we will also pause for a brief demo of one of them. In the 2050 cycle, communities will have new minimum requirements related to climate planning, reflecting a 2023 change in state statute. The Met Council will be rolling out tools to help communities achieve these requirements. One of these tools is the Greenhouse Gas Strategy Planning Tool, which will provide each community with a greenhouse gas inventory based on regional data and modeling. An example of a greenhouse gas inventory is the bar chart on the top right-hand corner of this slide. It provides a big picture snapshot of where emissions come from across different economic sectors and can help communities identify areas where taking action would have the most impact. The tool will also help communities identify strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and will project the potential emissions reductions based on those strategies. Also under development is the Climate Action Toolkit, which will include profiles of different climate actions that communities might include in their plans. This tool is being developed because of the feedback that we heard at the December Climate Planning Summit, where communities expressed a need for a strategy bank, case studies from the region, cost-benefit analysis, and relevant data sources all in one place. The profiles developed for this toolkit will try to address these needs in a way that supports communities of all types, from those who are just starting out to develop climate plans and those who have been doing climate work for years. For the next round of comprehensive plan updates, we will have a natural systems requirement consistent with Imagine 2050. To meet these requirements, we are providing technical assistance in the form of a mapping tool, a story map that provides context and examples of natural system strategies. The mapping tool is most directly applicable to meeting each of the requirements by providing the needed spatial data. Sean James, a senior planner with Local Planning Assistance, will now provide a demo of the natural systems tool, which is still under development.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I'm gonna grab the mouse in the corner here. So it works, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then it should just load for us on the fly here. So, thank you. Yes, I'm Sean James. I'm a senior planner with Local Planning Assistance, and I've been project managing development of these different technical assistance tools here. And so I've been aided by a great team of internal staff here from research, parks, environmental services, and communications. And we've also been working with a 15-member technical advisory committee. So this is staff from across the region, different agencies, cities, counties, park agencies, watersheds, conservation districts, and the DNR. And so with this tool here, the intended audience is city staff. But there's probably some secondary audiences too, really anyone that has interest in any of this data or working with cities, helping them with their comprehensive or just natural resource planning efforts. So a couple just quick introductory comments here. Why are we doing this? Well, natural systems are regional assets. They cross jurisdictional boundaries, and we'd like to help cities work with them, providing the assistance to help protect, improve natural systems. We also want to help cities think about how to grow and accommodate growth without compromising their natural systems, and help cities be intentional about how development and natural systems can be integrated and work together. So this tool is a draft. We're still working out the kinks here. Still need to refine some of the formatting, so apologies, some of the colors might appear. We'll see how they appear on the screen here. So just walking through the tool and how to use it, we're greeted by that splash screen that I clicked out of, and then we have a quick introductory how to use the tool. I'm not going to read through that because we'll walk through it here, but the way it works is cities will select their city. For our sake, we'll just pick the first one on the list here, Afton. And then it really takes us through the first 4 requirements for natural systems one by one here, clicking across that bar on the top here. So we click existing natural systems, and we're taken to the first requirement, which is to map and identify existing natural systems. So it shows us land and water areas that have some ecological function. And so this provides that initial inventory. And the way all of these different tabs work are we have a concept definition at the top, followed by the verbatim language of the minimum requirement, and then the different layers of the tool here. And so the top layer is our collated data set, and that's what's displayed on the screen. And then the layers below that are what make up that top layer there. And so we get the land cover, then we get a lot more detail when we click on some of these. And we also get a little bit introductory couple sentences about the data, why it matters, if there's any key statutes or programs that are related, and then contact information. And all of these, they're all existing data sets already available online. Most of them are not the Met Councils. A lot of them come from the DNR or other agencies. So, these blue, the title here provides that hyperlink to the data source. And so that is existing natural systems. Then we move to the second requirement, which is ask cities to think about areas that are already protected. And so we're using the language here, commonly protected areas. And so it's mapping, parks, open spaces, public waters, areas that are very unlikely to be developed. It also maps conservation easements. And so, let's see, the purpose of identifying this layer is because it's important. It helps inform what's already protected and where efforts could instead focus on restoration enhancement of natural systems. And it also will later help us hone in on, okay, where are significant areas that are not already protected. Because then if we look at the next requirement at the top here, scroll up, and we're identifying significant and sensitive ecological areas. And so this requirement works just like the others. We provide the baseline data at the bare minimum. Cities are asked to copy this, put it into their comp plan. That said, to do a little bit more, we'd encourage them to consider this data, make sure that it makes sense for their community. They're encouraged to add or update data if they have something that's more locally applicable. But what we're seeing here then are the significant areas. So what's being mapped are high quality ecological habitat, areas that support rare endangered species, areas that maybe serve some form of habitat connectivity purpose, and then native plant communities that are in good high quality. Sensitive areas is a little bit different concept, and some sensitive areas overlap with significant. But for these, we're thinking about areas that are, especially vulnerable to disturbances. So I'm thinking like human impacts, climate change, invasive species. And so this works the same way here. If I can scroll down, we get the collated data at the top here. And then the remainder of the significant areas that make up that collated underneath. And then a little bit different than to distinguish between significant, sensitive is, we click over sensitive then, and we get a different grouping of layers. And so there's certainly overlap between these two concepts, but by having sensitive and significant, it allows us to get a little bit more breadth understanding of different data sets that natural resource professionals use or consider in their work. And so some examples of sensitive, we're looking at like shoreland areas, areas adjacent to water bodies, steep slopes. Those areas don't always represent significant habitats, but they do have, the way that land is used in those areas has impact on the natural systems. So again, that's just a quick mapping exercise there. And then the last requirement works a little bit differently in that we're asking cities to consider these broad, what we're calling them broad protection and improvement opportunity areas. And then based on them, cities are asked to map or list what they consider are actual protection or improvement opportunities for their jurisdiction. And so both the opportunity area data sets were created based on a formula of the concepts that we just reviewed. So protection opportunities are those significant areas that fall outside of commonly protected areas. And then improvement opportunities are shown as significant or sensitive areas that have low habitat or water quality. For instance, like impaired waters might show up as an opportunity area. So again, it just provides this high-level regional look at this data to help cities hone in on what might be their own priorities or areas to focus on. So it's really up to the cities to decide where they choose to focus their efforts. And that's what the requirement is asking for is, that cities make that, take that task. And so those are the first 4 natural systems requirements. There are 3 others, but they're all qualitative in nature. We ask about goals, strategies, and any initiatives that, that the city has in mind. So just wrapping up, this effort is helping cities look at their local resources as part of this larger regional system. All of the data is already available online, so none of it is new, really, and most of it's probably not new to a lot of cities or city staff. But what the tool does is it packages the data and information in a way to be a little bit more readily consumed by planners or other city staff. It helps take some of this complex data and make it more digestible, breaking it into these conceptual pieces. The other thing this tool does is a lot of these data sets are large. They are tough to navigate. They take a long time to load. They're not user-friendly, and so the tool, I've just been loading it on the fly here, and it loads the information quick, and it gets planners that provides that quick base level information, and then if folks are interested, they can click and learn more and dive into the details. And so with that, I think I pass it back to Emma.
Thank you. Are you able to bring back the PowerPoint?
Yeah, well,
We'll see.
maybe. There we go.
Great, thank you. All right, and lastly, I want to highlight the resources that are being developed to address regional housing policy. So for the 2050 cycle, the housing team will be providing a toolkit which allows communities to connect their housing needs to policies, tools, and resources, including programs and fiscal devices. The toolkit will include considerations for implementation, local examples, best practices, as well as identifying possible challenges to implementation. The toolkit will also connect communities to Met Council funding sources available to help with implementation. Also, as part of the housing requirements for local governments is to complete an assessment of existing housing conditions in their community, so based on existing data. The Met Council will be providing all required data through an interactive data tool, as well as supplemental data including historical trends, downloadable charts, and explanations of how the data can be used to determine housing needs.
Back to me. So you are all aware of the work that we've been doing in this committee to update the Planning Assistance Grant Program. And I don't want to belabor that because we have a much more detailed presentation on that next. But this outlines at a high level the work that's been underway, as well as the committee's direction on focus and priorities for the 2050 planning cycle. This program is essential to comp planning process and adds to just the many ways that the council is providing assistance and how we strive to really help local governments throughout the planning process. I don't want to say ditto, but similarly, we will also be digging into this in the next agenda item. This has also been before the committee all year, and the technical pieces of that we'll talk about next. But as a new and critical program for the 2050 cycle, I just wanted to make sure that there was a complete picture of all the forms of technical assistance that the council develops, provides, facilitates, etc. This new program reflects the committee's focus and priorities that have been shared as the analysis progressed throughout the year. This program is really meant to address some of the observations that the council made during the last round, that even grant funds weren't necessarily enough to help some of the smallest communities complete their local planning requirements. And this program is intended to help with that. I want to end by talking about our education and training program for local planning staff, which we call Plan It because we're snappy and fun. This program was initially implemented in 2016 through the beginning or early 2016 through 2018 over a 20-month period. We're going to relaunch the Plan It program in 2026, which in the last round offered a variety of events and resources, all free, and focused primarily on local planning staff as the primary audience, although we did have planning commission members and other members of the public, students and others attend various workshops and webinars as well. Included in this program were free continuing education credits from the American Planning Association, which is the professional organization for most of the local planners in the region. We organized a free full-day planners conference as well, again with credits available to local planning staff, and all local events as well. So all of these events and resources were offered to help local governments understand minimum planning requirements, as well as share resources on planning issues that might be important locally to a community. For example, in the last round, we provided a great deal of resources around climate and natural systems planning, even though there weren't many specific requirements on those. But a lot of local governments have already been leading in climate for a very long time. And so we were providing resources around those topics as well. And we'll do the same in this next round. We had good participation in these events. We had an average of about 20 to 30 participants in most of the webinars and workshops. Back then, remember, all of the workshops were in person. We didn't have a lot of virtual options. Webinars were about as close as you could get to virtual meeting back then. And then about 230 people attended the Plan It conference. And so we consider that one of the biggest successes. I have a lot of other data too, but you guys don't want to hear about web clicks and things like that and some of these other resources. So for the Imagine 2050 cycle comprehensive planning, the main objective for the Planet program is to create new content to help communities understand new regional policy, the planning process and how to meet minimum requirements, as well as offer information on how to get more out of your plan during this effort. If you're going to do a big planning effort, you may as well get your bang out of your buck, is that right? How you say it? Okay. My grandpa would be disappointed that I messed that up. Okay. The team also wants to improve the branding and outreach efforts and improve the user experience. The Planet website will be updated to make learning and training resources easily accessible throughout the planning cycle. We're early in the planning process for the relaunch of Planet, and right now we're primarily focused on getting organized, getting a structure in place, and connecting with the technical staff in each policy area that will eventually lead their team's work and ultimately coordinate and create content for the Planet program itself. So that's a lot of work that's underway at the council. I wanted to provide an overview. Obviously, as Emma was talking about the local planning handbook, and as Sean's giving a demonstration of just one of the tools, you can see that there's a real depth to, when we say handbook, there's a real depth to what's included in the handbook, and we just wanted to make sure that we were sharing that with all of you. If you have any questions, if you see any gaps, please let us know. This isn't the first time, this is the last time that you will have some of this information in front of you. As we need feedback on local government perspective, we always come to this committee, and we'll continue to do that as we're building out new and different resources and tools. Any questions?
Go ahead.
So I have a couple of questions on the climate section of it.
Okay.
You said that there'll be greenhouse gas emission data there. Can you tell me what your source is? Because in our climate and our energy planning documents, we've been using DHL data, which I assume it's all sourced from the same place, right? Utility statements, but will that look different than a lot of the models and illustrations we used in some of our published documentation?
Everything should be consistent. I don't know the answer to your question as far as data sources. However, our research team is part of the team members that are leading this effort. And so what I can do, and what we had planned on doing, is in our next iteration of this is having one of our team members from the climate tool come and give a demonstration of that tool as well. And they will have kind of that background, like how are the cogs working in the background. I don't know that information, but we're happy to bring the team in and walk through a demonstration of that tool as well. We have other tools like the housing tool, and I'm missing one of the big ones, probably. No, I can't remember. So we can have other tools brought for the committee too, so you can make sure that those questions are answered as well.
Any other questions?
Are you considering development of a tool that would correlate infrastructure with economic development opportunities? So thinking about MUSA, thinking about sort of how we're driving development throughout various jurisdictions, is there a tool that can look at infrastructure, size, capacity, et cetera, and correlate that to opportunities for redevelopment? Thinking of First Ring, is that our city in particular?
Yeah, redevelopment is hard for us to capture. Most of our data comes from building permit data and housing production surveys and things like that local governments report to us. Oftentimes what we hear from local governments is that they're hesitant to identify specific redevelopment areas just because maybe a particular property owner doesn't want that identified as a redevelopment area. So we have had in the past a light touch on redevelopment. However, we are exploring how we implement a redevelopment monitoring program. We'll use some of the work with regional economic framework, the comprehensive economic development strategy planning process to integrate some of those economics into it. We have an economics, well, Todd, you'll correct me, an economic-based land use model where we get a lot of our that's where our forecasts are generated from. And so growth is connected to those market forces in that way. That's where our original forecasts come from. But that doesn't necessarily target redevelopment. It would target growth, but not identify a type of growth specifically, because local governments do that.
Chair, could I just ask a clarification on Ms. Worthington's question? Could you give an example of what sort of opportunities? And my best guess was like, help a first ring suburb identify there's lots of sewer capacity and like an overbuilt roadway here and you can put a bunch of density easily. Is that what you're talking about or something else?
Nailed it. Very well.
Okay.
Very good.
I would say as one first ring suburb, that sounds really helpful as an idea, so.
I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I think it's a correlation between infrastructure data and land use. And so I don't actually think it's a building permit exercise, but I'm happy to chat more about it with whoever wants to chat about it.
And I would also say our comprehensive plans inherently kind of identify certain properties that are more suited because we've designated that for higher density or for changes or different land use than currently exists. So I think that slight conflict already exists no matter what.
Go ahead.
So I have lots of questions, but I don't want to hog. Can you talk a little bit more, when you say personalized content, is it specific to the things that are generally known about our population and our density and our land space? Or does it also take into account maybe what we had in our 24 comp plan and what we've already delivered and what's in our climate and in our energy plans? Does it integrate all of that, or is it more just it's the basics threshold of here's the basics? Do you want to?
Sure. So the information on community pages is based on information that the council is providing related to the minimum requirements that we're asking those communities to achieve. And so it's your forecast data, sewer allocation, yeah. We are also providing though maps for each community, so often minimum requirements are related to, show us these features in your community, And that is something that some communities have to pay a lot of money for a consultant to do or a lot of staff time for their own GIS department to do. And so we are trying to provide those resources for free as often as possible so that communities can kind of reallocate where they are spending their resources, be it time or staff or financial.
So I have another question around who has access to the tools? Is it really just going to be the planners and staff?
So yeah, the local planning handbook is a publicly available website, and so anybody with access to the internet would be able to utilize it. However, the tools are really built for local planning communities, and so I think that there is a lot of useful information on there that a resident might find very interesting, but the reality is the tool is for local planners or consultants.
So a planning commission if they're interested in looking at things themselves. So, go ahead. And my next thing is not a question specifically, it's just more of an FYI on this natural systems planning tool. It's an awesome thing. And I just went to a workshop yesterday as part of a watershed meeting. But it was with this collaborative, it's been a 2-year collaborative, University of Minnesota and other things. It's the flood risk and resiliency capacity mapping of the upper Mississippi River Basin, specifically in St. Paul. Are you familiar with it?
I am. A colleague forwarded me the notes and I haven't read through it yet.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Because
good.
it's the same kind of tool, but they have overlaid flooding with social, economic, land use maps. And they've done projections of if we put rain gardens in, what's the flood risk mitigation if we planted trees? And so it's very dynamic, and I think they have their funding through the end of the year, and they were looking for additional opportunities, so good that you're connected, because it looks like it's a good tool to help us plan future. I think that's it.
Go ahead, Joe.
I don't know who can answer this, maybe gentleman down there, but I'm curious. My perception of cities and the county, do they actually listen to what information you have? like invasive species and plants and everything, do they actually, 'cause I think the cities with their permitting process, they don't care about things like that. It's, but you take this track, you take that track. Do they actually listen to you guys at the Met Council when it comes to things like this?
Suppose I'm learning a little bit, yeah, honestly, I've been here about a year now. Maybe some better than others, but yeah, when I think about the natural systems work, sometimes it lives at the county level because the county serves as like the soil water conservation district. But other times the county doesn't, and so the cities maybe take more initiative or have the staff to do that work. You know, the DNR plays a role too, watersheds, there's all these different partners in the region that, you know, can inform the work, and I guess I see our role as kind of facilitating, helping to collaborate among them.
Well, like, I'll give you an example. Let's say a tract of land that they're gonna build on has low areas, maybe even semi-swampy areas, you know, where you can tell by the kind of vegetation that grows. Seems like they get lost in the development. They know they're building a road next to it or houses next to it. And that's all part of the ecosystem because over time, Mother Nature created those things to take the excess water and everything instead of, you know, and my understanding is the aquifers, the best filtered water comes from these swamps. Is that a fact? So if you're tinkering with them, that messes up the whole system, doesn't it?
Right, yeah, and so I guess our approach and with this tool is we're trying to help cities think beyond like the development parcel, beyond even just their jurisdictions, and think about these, you know, these data sets or these systems really as part of a larger whole. And so yeah, impact in one area impacts all these other adjacent areas.
I mean, the animals that go into the swamps, frogs, turtles, they walk across people's lawn and they may, you know, kill them or something, you know. Well, they're there for a reason, you see. Then they wonder why there's so many mosquitoes or something. So I just wondered if these places actually listened, you know, to your guys' advice and knowledge about things like that.
Yeah, I guess I can't answer specifically. Maybe
So I can give you my perspective, not as a city council person. Prior to being on city council, I was an advocate for environmental things for 10 years. And I actually was effective in convincing our council to adopt better things because I could point to Met Council's documents and said, this is what Met Council's putting out there, this is where we're going to. And so I think it's a helpful tool. Does it always convince city planners? But I think it helps give voice to more pressure.
I would say too, just to add on to this, Jerry, that communities listen to us very effectively when it comes to minimum requirements. But when it comes to things that the Met Council doesn't have regulatory authority over, we're not trying to dictate what local governments can do in those instances. Natural systems, until this most recent regional development guide, hasn't had a regional goal or specific policies around it. It's been a much more broader touch on natural systems planning. I think this is the first time where we're actually establishing specific planning requirements related to natural systems. And I think that, you know, as communities are doing their comp plans, they're thinking about these things much more broadly. And so like the committee woman was saying, I think the more information that we put out, the more communities use that information for various purposes.
I don't know, it just seems to me that maybe sometimes that council wastes their time and money because people don't listen to you anyway, right? You know,
Well,
I
that
see
may
it all
always be the
Carver
case.
County,
We
you know,
can't,
all
yeah.
the time.
That's
You know,
We really
They built by
respond to what
swamps
we're
and-
being asked to provide as well. So we know that there's interest and we know that there was a need for a consolidation of information that was easily accessible. And so that's why Sean and his team are working on this particular project. We try not to produce things that people won't use. We usually talk with local planners and evaluate whether or not it's an effective use of our time and resources to develop something like that. And a lot of really good tools exist elsewhere too. And so in that case, then we would point to a new or a different resource that a different agency put together that was just as effective in planning something we might develop.
I didn't mean to be smug or anything, but
No.
I mean, I see farmland being made into houses. Now, I can't think of farmlands that I know always have low areas. Farmers try to drain it with tiles, which is ridiculous. So when they put in houses, they must cut off those tile lines, right? Or they break them so they don't drain them. Is that your understanding of?
They have to provide on-site, like however the subdivision develops, they have to provide stormwater management for that particular development when they develop.
Who looks over their plans?
The cities do.
Of the cities.
And watershed districts, if there's watershed
Yeah,
districts, things
watershed.
like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I have another question, specifically around the natural systems plan, and when we go to do that. If we've got a lake that's in multi-jurisdictions, 2 counties, 2 cities, a park district, a watershed district, is it whose responsibility to do the planning for that? Do you offer assistance in forcing collaboration? How do you decide if it's just at this crux of 7 different entities besides the DNR, right?
Again, we don't force collaboration, so I don't wanna maybe approach it that way. But similar to what Merritt was talking about with the comprehensive economic development strategy, we convene and we can, facilitate conversations. We usually do that when there are sticky issues. Usually if it's something that communities are working well on, we stay out of it. Communities work together really well all over the place, but there are some times where, better partnership is possible. We can convene meetings in that regard.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Great tools, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We will be moving on to the Small Communities Planning Program and 2050 Planning Assistance Grant Program eligibility criteria recommendation. With Merritt again.
Merritt's way over there.
I know,
Why don't you
I can grab the clicker and we'll bring it back to you. All right, I think I have to wait for the next presentation to pop up on the screen, but I assume that's happening. Hello, Merritt again. And Angela and I are coming back to you, as we have in our recent meetings with this committee to talk about the Small Communities Planning Program and 2050 Planning Assistance Grants. So I will get us rolling today and then I will turn things over to Angela. So I'm going to start with a little update on some analysis we've done on potentially eligible communities since our meeting in May. I'll then give you an update on the Small Communities Planning Program, eligibility for that, and how we want to approach engineering. I'll then turn it over to Angela, who will talk about the Planning Assistance Grant Programs and funding considerations, as well as next steps. So we've been doing an analysis of the potentially eligible communities and looking at a few things. First, we addressed a committee request from LUAC in May, which asked us to analyze if any communities were very close to, or what we'll call on the cusp of being eligible or not eligible for assistance, such that a small change in the criteria would bump them one way or the other. So we looked at the data for current population and for net tax capacity per capita to identify if anyone was really close to the margin. And for current population, we evaluated if a 3% increase or decrease would change who was on the list. For example, a 3% change of a city population of 1,000 would be plus or minus 30 people, while a city of 30,000, it would be plus or minus 900. And based on that 3% margin, we found that no communities would change their eligibility status. We then did the same thing for net tax capacity per capita. We evaluated a 3% increase or decrease in that per capita net tax capacity. So for instance, a 3% variation from 125% would mean that they'd be 122 and 128%. So based on the 3% margin of change, we again found that no communities were close enough that it would change their eligibility. The next thing we looked at, based on that, we're not recommending any changes around the thresholds. Second, we updated the current population data to 2024. So the data set we've been working with to date was from 2023, but Met Council staff just went through the updates of current population to 2024. They come up with the numbers, they reach out to communities, they ask if any communities have concerns or think those numbers should be tweaked, they make the final revisions. And so we updated our data set for the 2024 population numbers. And based on that, the number of communities eligible for grants moved from 63 to 68. And the number eligible for the Small Communities Program increased from 30 to 32. So I'll just say that when we updated the population, that affected the criteria of current population, and it also affected the net tax capacity per capita because that per capita number changed. So the third piece that we will be analyzing coming up in late July will be the actual net tax capacity data. So we get this data from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. I reached out to them, they said that they should be releasing the 2025 data set at the end of this month. When I get that data set, I will update all of the numbers of net tax capacity per capita for all of the communities. We expect that it's likely that the list will shift a bit based on that, just like it did when we updated the current population. So here we have our first official map for the group. You saw this in the materials we sent ahead of time. So this map shows the analysis for both programs based on the current data and eligibility criteria. We wanted you to see the reference of the two programs together, but we will also show you maps that show each separately. This was attachment 3 in the memo, and attachment 4 in the memo had a list of the communities because even if you zoom into the map, it can be very hard to read the names, particularly of some of the smaller communities. Just very quickly to orient you, and you'll see this on the other maps, the yellow coloring are communities that we're currently identifying as eligible under the proposed criteria for grants. These are the smaller cities under 1,500. The green are the communities that would be eligible for grants that are between 15,000 and 35,000 population. In blue, we have the communities that are covered under the grants to Scott and Carver County. So these are all their townships for which they still have land use planning authority. And the pink color shows communities that are identifying as eligible for the Small Communities Program. The final thing that you'll see in the bottom right corner is a cross-hatching. And this shows all of the communities that could potentially be eligible for the consortium grant that we've used for those rural Dakota County communities in the past. However, we're going to talk about what it means if you're already eligible for a grant or the Small Communities Program. So let's take a look at potential eligibility for the Small Communities Program with the updated analysis. So you'll see here we've continued forward with the criteria. We've had 4 that's based both on current population and then tax capacity per capita. At this point, we're identifying 13 communities that would be eligible that are under 500 population, 11 that are between 500 and 999 population, and 8 that would be eligible between 1,000 and 2,500 population, for a total of 32 communities. So this is the map that shows you just those communities that are eligible under the current criteria we've been discussing, shown in pink. You can see that they're distributed across the region. We do have a little bit more of a concentration in that southeastern part of the region in Dakota County. But otherwise, we have a mix across the counties. Many of them are in rural locations, but we do have some more central locations as well in developed communities such as Hilltop, Lauderdale, Landfall, and Mendota. Council staff will lead most of the comprehensive plan update work, as we've discussed, with the communities that are in the program. However, we're going to need assistance with the most technical elements of those plans, and we'll be contracting with professional engineers to assist with the wastewater, water supply, and surface water plan elements. We'll contract for a package of services to cover all communities in the program. Since the specific needs of each community around those plans are very unique, it depends on the type of wastewater service they have, how many water bodies they have, how they're sourcing their water. So everybody's kind of got different needs. The local planning assistance team staffers will also work with staff from other divisions within the council to address technical plan elements such as mapping of the future land use maps. If a community in the program has existing planning or engineering consultants, it'll be essential for anybody that we consult with and our staff to coordinate closely with them to ensure that we have the most current information and data available. So with that, we've been talking about this for a number of meetings. At the next meeting of this group in September, we'll be looking for a formal recommendation that will then be brought forward to the council. So at this time, just specific to the Small Communities Program, I'd like to ask, are you still comfortable with the proposed eligibility criteria, or do you think we should do any further adjustments to those? That's the first question.
Thank you. Sure. So would you mind explaining just the reasoning behind the analysis of less than or equal to 175%,
Yes.
150, 125, and how you came to that?
Yes, thank you. There's something, we've had to spend some time on in previous meetings, and I know this is your first meeting. So in thinking about this program more broadly, what we've found in the past is the very smallest communities in the region are really stretched to update their comprehensive plans. In many cases for these communities, we're not even talking about how many staff, because there aren't any staff at all. Maybe they have a part-time clerk and that's it. And so when we're thinking about, all right, well, these would be communities that would really have to hire consultants to do their plans, and do they have the budget to do so? Well, the smaller the population is, the less opportunity they have to generate tax revenue, which they could use to put towards a plan. So one of the criteria is population, but the other criteria, net tax capacity per capita, that's how much money they might be able to raise kind of per person in their community. When you, let's say you're a community of 2,500 and you're generating your tax revenues, you know, the revenue you can generate from 2,500 people might be reasonable enough that you can be hiring a consultant. And so sorry, this is kind of a long explanation, but we're always measuring it, that percent metro median. We're comparing all these communities to the median sort of net tax capacity across the region. So if you take that midpoint, who's sort of below, 100% is the midpoint, who's above. So as you get smaller, we're letting you get a little higher net tax capacity per capita while still remaining eligible, understanding that even if you're, say, at 175% of that metro median, if you only have 300 people in your community, you're still going to have a very limited amount of budget that you can be raising for consultants. So we sort of scale it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. I guess my question is, so for example, the one you just said, you have 300 people in your community, you still likely don't have staff, right?
Correct.
And so even at, let's say, 176% of metro median, they're still in a very difficult position. Is it just that you needed to cut off at some point? And how that determination?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are some extremely small communities in this region that are very, very, very wealthy. So when we're thinking about the fact that we can only serve so many communities in the region with these programs, we're looking at what's sort of the subset where the greatest need is. And that's under state statute. It says we can offer grant and assistance based on need and financial situation. So we're creating criteria that sort of differentiate the communities of greater and lesser need. So it's a cutoff point. I think we've often talked about in this group, if we said, well, who could use our help in the region with comp plans? The answer is everybody, but we don't have the resources to serve everybody. So we're just trying to find kind of some logical cutoff points that then give us the ability to at least serve a subset of those with greater need.
Thank you.
Is that helpful?
Mm-hmm.
I'm satisfied with it. No program is ever perfect, of course.
Yeah.
And you just have to do your best guess, your best estimates, and go with it. Just go with it then.
Yeah.
And let the chips fall within me, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely appreciate the analysis of looking to see, I think that analysis is the analysis that finds if there is the community that's at 176, and could have been eligible. That's what I was concerned about in asking about this in the last couple of discussions. And so I appreciate that analysis was done, because that probably tells you that the 175 breakdown is there's the eligible communities below it, and then there's this other pool of communities, they're way up here. You don't need to set the eligibility at 350, that's the next bar or whatever you said at the 175 to capture the ones.
Thank you for your explanation, that was really helpful to understand. I have a question, do you think your 175 is a good place where you've landed if given different dynamics of a city in terms of their ability to have tax capacity? So for instance, a small community that has only residential and very few businesses, they're even more burdened, they're taxpayers. Do you think 175 is adequate to have accounted for the disparity in their land use potential?
So this is their net tax capacity across kind of everything they could possibly be taxing within their jurisdiction. So it includes what their mix is of industrial, commercial, residential, and whatnot, to be inclusive of that. And I mean, as with the grants, we're kind of scaling the criteria to give us a group of eligibility that then fits with our resources to deliver services. So if we're thinking maybe we will have 3 staff that are working with me to do these comp plan updates for these communities. If we had, instead of 4 people, we had 8, well, maybe we'd shift the eligibility criteria so more people could be in the program. So it's kind of that, trying to find that fit. My second question is there any additional analysis or information you feel that you'll need in order to be ready to take action on a recommendation of September? And just a reminder, when we come back in September, you're gonna see the list of eligibility for this program shift a bit, probably based on that new data from revenue. All right? Thank you.
You.
Oh, thank you. So, when we're talking about on the cusp communities, one of the things that we were also taking into consideration is what is the next program that we have to assist the next group of communities. So those that are eligible for the Small Communities Program are not eligible for this, which is the Planning Assistance Grant Fund Program, Planning Assistance Grant Program. But there isn't a gap between the 2 programs either. So you're eligible for one or the other. There are some communities in the Dakota County Collaborative that are eligible for more than one, but they can participate in one. So this table then shows the eligibility criteria that's been developed over this year. A community would be eligible for planning assistance grant under the recommended eligibility criteria for this next 2050 planning cycle. If they meet one of these sets of criteria, a total of 68 individual communities, 2 counties, and 1 consortium group would be eligible for grant funding. The general eligibility criteria is primarily based on population and net tax capacity per capita, as Merritt was explaining. The committee supported these factors as to what constitutes a recipient's demonstrated need and available financial resources, which is the statutory language on what we have to base our program development under. The population ranges and the net tax capacity per capita factors haven't changed since our last conversation. Sorry. So again, here we have different population ranges and net tax capacity per capita percentages for the general eligibility criteria for a total of 68 communities. There are some clarifications to the criteria for the county and consortium eligibility criteria that I just wanted to make sure everybody understood why we were tweaking them. Initially, the way it was worded, it could be interpreted that more than just Scott and Carver County would be eligible as a county to receive a grant fund or grant from the program. The reason that we have consistently provided Scott and Carver County grants for this program is because they have planning authority for all of the townships within their boundaries, and those townships delegate their planning authority up to the county. So the county has additional planning responsibilities as part of this process than other counties do. Anoka, Dakota, Ramsey, etc. don't have those same planning requirements because they either don't have townships within their boundaries or they don't have planning authority. The townships do their own local planning instead. So we just wanted to clarify, this really only applies to Scott and Carver counties because of those circumstances. Secondly, the small cities and townships in Dakota County have collaborated during the past 3 planning cycles. So that's a long history of doing planning collaboratively. They do that to increase their kind of efficiencies, and they have similar planning issues, and so it does make sense. It's likely that a lot of those communities, maybe not all, but a lot of those communities may want to participate in that same collaborative function again. And Dakota County communities are unlike the communities in any of the other counties. Similar to what I was just saying about Scott and Carver County, the small Dakota County communities are unlike the other counties in that they are either very small, there's a lot of townships that are also in Dakota County as well. We did want to clarify the eligibility criteria in that we would focus on Dakota County communities, because again, in the last round, we weren't specific to a county, and so any county or any 5 communities essentially could have created a consortium and been eligible for a planning grant, but we think that it's most appropriate for the Dakota County communities that have previously done this to continue to do that if they want to. We also focus just on the rural service area communities. That really just excludes like a lot of the larger cities that already have adequate planning staff or other resources that they may be able to more reasonably use than the small Dakota County rural service area communities. So that is the bulk of the changes. With that, the consortium criteria did change, and there's an error in the staff report that said that there were 16 communities eligible with 17 communities that are eligible. That number doesn't include the 2 counties in this numbering as well, but the one group, 2 jurisdictions, 68 communities are what kind of is the output for the planning criteria that we've been talking about thus far. So I'll show the map for that. Merritt already went through kind of the color scheme. The only kind of thing that we may be confused about is that there were planning, small communities planning program eligible communities that are also eligible for the consortium. Like I said, they don't have to participate in any of this, they get to choose. And if they want to choose to participate, they would just choose to participate in either one program or the other. Not all of the consortium communities are eligible for the small communities program, and similarly vice versa. This map then just shows kind of the Scott and Carver County breakdown, the consortium, and then the mid and small sized communities that would be eligible for grant funds. I will say too that this again has been a change from some of the criteria in the last round, because in the last round we were also adding growth as a factor, and the committee and in our conversations with local governments and consultants, it didn't seem as though growth was creating additional burden on the planning process or additional challenges or impacting their ability to complete their planning process. And so again, the focus is on population size, which did seem to have a significant impact on their ability to complete their plans, and again, net tax capacity per capita. So it is normal, I just want to kind of say it's normal from decade to decade as eligibility criteria shifts for some communities that were eligible are no longer eligible, and vice versa, that were not eligible that may now be eligible. So just if you need a reference point in the staff report, both the map and list for the 2016 which was 2040 planning process is in the memo, and you can reference that if you're concerned about that. One thing that we haven't spoken about before is kind of the grant award categories. So in the 2040 planning cycle, there were 3 outside of the small cities, which we're proposing to cover with the small communities planning program. There were sewer communities grants, unsewered community grants, and then again the county consortium grants as categories for different award amounts. We're not proposing that changes, but we haven't talked about it before. We did make some assumptions on carrying that forward in our future tables, but that can be adjusted if the committee decides that you would like to go in a different direction. I just wanted to highlight that for this conversation. And so then I have several questions here. Do you support the clarifications to the county consortium criteria would be the first question.
That makes sense.
I'm seeing nods, hearing affirmative, okay. Do you support retaining the same award categories from the 2040 planning cycle? That's the sewered, unsewered, and then the county consortium. award categories. We're not talking about dollar amounts just yet, but just the award categories as a differentiating factor for the amount. I see nods, great, we're moving quickly. Do the proposed eligibility criteria for the 2050 Planning Grants Program need any further adjustments? And with that, do you need any additional analysis? If you want some adjustments, do you need additional analysis from us to feel as though you're comfortable making a recommendation in September?
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. So sorry, another question which you probably already covered, but I'm just specifically about the next tax capacity. I understand that comes from the state, it's going to be issued by the end of July. Are they doing it on is it a state criteria of what they think could be eligible, or is it what actually the taxes are in that local jurisdiction? So for example, they may vary, two similarly situated cities might have different tax rates. Are they looking at their local taxes, or are they doing it on a statewide, average basis?
I'm gonna try to answer here, and maybe someone can correct me if I'm getting it wrong, but my understanding is the data set that we're pulling is their capacity to generate taxes, so it's not their actual tax rate, what they're choosing to tax at, but so it's kind of a level playing field based on all of their uses across their community. What would be their potential to generate taxes from that? Is that
Yeah, that's exactly the question. So if they have lower taxes, then their capacity would be, they're actually having less revenue to potentially go through the planning process than they might otherwise have, according to the state estimate.
correct? Because under our kind of what it says in Minnesota statute for us is we're supposed to consider kind of the financial capacity of a community to make a decision to fund things like planning consultants. So that's the capacity piece. What they choose to do as a policy is different.
Thank you very much.
Any other responses to the questions?
Go ahead.
So one question, I noticed in the colored map, Binghamton is white, but I also noticed it's on the list, so I wonder what that really means.
You might have been looking at
And
the
those are so
2016 map.
tiny.
Which one you say?
St. Anthony, because right, it's all about me. I thought, I checked my city, and it's white on the map, I think, but it's so tiny.
We will double check that and make sure it's right.
And there are different St. Anthony's, so it's like, I don't know if that's me or not.
And you do sit in 2 counties?
Yeah, we sit in 2 counties.
We'll verify that.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. Assuming we're having all the grants the same as 2040, and the number of cities is just slightly up, so the grant process to the Met Council is going to be quite similar to 24 in total amounts. Is that true?
Chair and committee members, we haven't talked about amounts just yet, so that's to be determined. We're just talking
Okay, well,
about
I
award
was
categories for now.
just curious if the council has an objective to allow for more money to be distributed on this round, or keep it the same as last one, or reduce it.
Sure, what I will say is that we started in a tenuous position because we usually have a lot more interest earnings than we did as we were coming into this planning cycle. And so what we have done is ask for additional funding from other parts of the council, the general fund and other places. And even like my local planning assistance budget is adding some stuff where we have been able to pull together a total grant budget that we will, I think, be able to then in the next round be able to more readily keep the fund generated. not necessarily only relying on interest earnings. So we have done a lot of budget planning in order to get to where we are with the budget today. The last budget was just under $2 million, and we have more than that because we're trying to adjust for inflation at the very least with these grants. And so does that answer your question?
Close enough.
Close enough. We cobbled together the money for you guys.
Go ahead, Robert.
I don't know that I know too much about how consortiums work, but if one of the Dakota County townships who are double eligible, if they take the small community planning program grant, do they kind of disable an opportunity for them to work collaboratively as a consortium?
No, there are consultants that generally kind of whip up who wants to be in the consortium and they organize themselves. It wouldn't prevent anyone from participating in the consortium. There are enough communities that are not eligible for the Small Communities program that would still have an eligible number of communities to create a consortium. Does that answer your question? Okay. Do we feel like thumbs up on moving forward on this topic? Okay. So today, we'll also talk, I wanted to start this on a pretty picture. Because who knows where this will go. Today, we'll also talk about funding considerations for these two programs. We'll discuss opportunities that the grant program provides to advance regional goals and incentivize early plan submission, which are two kind of key factors for this next planning process. We'll also discuss a local cost share option as it relates to the Small Communities Planning Program. Those three factors all address various programmatic needs, recognize realistic budget constraints, and influence the overall budget scenarios that are under consideration. We'll review 3 potential funding scenarios for grant awards and review 2 potential options to consider how funds might be distributed based on programmatic needs. The first of 2 incentive programs is proposed to advance regional goals. Imagine 2050 identifies 5 regional goals. Local governments implement those goals through the policies, priorities, and actions in local comprehensive plans. And the resources, tools, and planning requirements related to goals like climate and natural systems help local governments contribute to advancing those regional goals. There are more people-centric goals though, specifically equity, which require a more tailored approach and probably best led by local governments. Communities often cite a lack of funding as a barrier to do this kind of work, and this proposal identifies a means for local governments to increase their funding availability if they opt into that program. This incentive is only intended to supplement local efforts and encourage equity-centered planning efforts. The Planning Assistance Grant Program provides an opportunity to offer a financial incentive to support local governments integrate equity strategies into their local planning processes, set equity-focused priorities, and consider local equity initiatives beyond what might be included in minimum requirements. Imagine 2050 includes 4 frameworks that local governments could use or adapt to help establish some of those local equity approaches. Just wanted to provide the goals and the frameworks that the council adopted as part of Imagine 2050 as examples. This obviously, local governments wouldn't be required to implement those frameworks, but we would set some parameters as what we would consider beyond the minimum for equity initiatives. So I ask 2 questions here. Are there other regional issues that you want to incentivize, and what issues would your community focus on? And what level of financial incentive with the planning grant would it take for your community to participate? Hearing none, what I will offer is that In the future slides, we do make an assumption of a $7,000 incentive kind of baseline, which communities could add on to their baseline eligibility grant, whichever that ends up being. And so is that enough to incentivize a community that is eligible for the planning grant to opt in your?
Can I ask you a question? Was that incentive only for the people who qualify for the small planning programs, not beyond your current group of 68 entities?
Correct. If you're eligible for a planning grant, you would, in the county or consortium and the general eligibility, those communities would be eligible to opt in for an additional grant to advance some of these regional goals. Any thoughts?
Tough question. I think mayors would probably be the most inclined.
What does it cost to add that into our consulting fee for the project? It's better, it's certainly, 7,000 is more than, it's more than 5,000.
It is, I was trying to get as much as I could.
And certainly for a smaller community, I mean, it's hard to speak, you know, because we're not eligible for any of this stuff, so it doesn't matter. But for me personally, but certainly for a smaller community, I can see where that could be significant enough to potentially push them to try to get that.
Attend your Lauderdale for a minute.
Can I ask you a question? Does this assume that you're already providing them a broad map of the area? Like they don't have to go out and say, what is social, what are the conditions of my environment, right? It assumes they already know they have this opportunity and where it is, and they just do additional planning for it, right? It's not data gathered first.
We haven't dictated what the requirements would be. We do have some tools around in visualizing racial equity and other things that the council has currently. We're working on updating those tools and resources. So we do have that level of kind of demographic information and where opportunity areas as it relates to environmental justice areas. For example, we do have an equity considerations database that communities can tap into that offers a variety of data sets around housing and like anything that could be considered around equity. And so we obviously provide those things, and we would provide the other tools and resources that would be for example, in the local planning handbook, we would provide, even though it's not a minimum requirement, we would provide resources around community-centered engagement. And if a community wanted to opt in and really focus on an age-friendly Minnesota designation, or really focusing on environmental justice. I mean, the community would likely, like I said, we haven't set any of those parameters yet, but the community would be able to drive what local issues related to equity would potentially fit in with this. We do have a lot of data that we would provide them. Is the short answer to your first question. I feel like I added on a little bit there.
No, thank you for that. You make me wonder, so you would have some level of minimum requirement, but this funding is to go beyond the minimum requirement, is that true?
The council has minimum requirements integrated across policy areas, and some of those have an equity lens towards them. We do have in, for example, the land use policy, a requirement now for communities to at least identify their existing, like do an existing community assessment. And we have the data that can help provide that level of meeting that minimum requirement. Wherever we try and set a minimum requirement, we also try and provide a resource for communities to meet that minimum requirement. Equity is not a system or a required statutory policy area, and so we don't tend to have minimum requirements for that, except as it may support the regional goals and as it may support implementing the regional policies that the council did adopt as part of Imagine 2050.
Go ahead, Bill.
Similar to comments made, it's hard to say if 7,000 is enough of an incentive, but I'd look at it from a council. It would cover a staff person at least 2 weeks work, a couple meetings, you gotta convince the council it's a worthwhile effort with the documentation there. And I would say it would cover reasonably
And it
cost.
certainly goes towards it too, so you
Correct.
could team that up with some other pot of money to be able to make it work.
And communities do a lot, equity isn't just engagement, I wanna be clear about that. But communities do a lot of engagement in a lot of different ways anyway. So it could supplement efforts that they may already be considering. If a community wants to focus on a particular equity issue, maybe it's around affordable housing. Communities may have already initiated studies, may have already done a lot of pre-work on some of these issues as well, and so it can supplement planned efforts already. It's not really intended to pay for everything. It's always been the plan grants. Yeah. Any additional thoughts on this? I'll move on to the next one. Okay. By law, the council must provide a formal response within 15 business days of receipt of a comprehensive plan submittal that identifies if a submittal is complete or not. 2040 plans were due to the council on December 31st of 2018. And just to give you a perspective of the amount of work the council deals with in the month of December alone, it doesn't count January or November, let's be clear about that. In 2018, the council received 72 local comprehensive plans in the month of December. The level of review necessary for each plan is significant. I can't stress that part enough. Maybe you're hearing the trauma in my voice for having been through it in the last round, I don't know. And each plan requires contributions from technical experts in each of the policy areas: transportation, wastewater, water supply, surface water management, regional parks and trails, land use, housing, forecast. I'm sure I'm forgetting some. The statutory review timeline must be prioritized over all other tasks. So this is a significant undertaking for the council as well. This incentive program that we're talking about encourages a more phased approach to submission of local comprehensive plans. I assume also it would help local governments as they are doing a 6-month review of adjacent and affected jurisdictions as well. But this will hopefully increase plan review efficiency and accuracy, as well as allow staff to continue to provide the high levels of customer service throughout the planning process that local governments are really accustomed to from us. The sector representatives are all technical reviewers as well, so when we are reviewing those technical documents, we can't be doing the same level of sector representative assistance as we normally do, just to give you an example. That also applies to all the other technical areas as well. So all of this would support more positive relationships with local partners. And again, this proposal identifies a means for local governments to increase their funding availability if they opt in to this program. So I have 2 questions for you here. What might limit the ability for your community to plan for submission prior to the deadline of December 31st of 2028? We're looking at a 6-month prior to that deadline type of deadline for early submission. And is the proposed amount, I just used the same $7,000 assumption as an incentive for early submission in your community. Opening for those 2 questions. And again, it doesn't have to be 7,000 to be clear, I just use that because of budget availability.
Is this more broadly available, or is it specific to, once again, the small communities and the categories we've already been talking about?
It's not even the small community, communities, it's only the planning grant communities because that's the fund that we have available to us and can only be available, those grant dollars can only be available based on the eligibility criteria.
Go ahead.
Chair Angela, just to clarify, so when you say this is an incentive, if that city takes your money, is this a requirement to submit? I'm sorry to turn your language around, but is it truly an incentive or is it a requirement?
It is, so the way that we would structure it, the way we do our grants right now is that we distribute a first half payment to kind of kick off the process. The second half payment is received by the city after or the community, after they have an authorized plan where they have met all of their grant reporting requirements. And if they were unable to meet the early submission deadline, they would just simply not receive that incentive dollars. It's not a requirement. They wouldn't be penalized. They just wouldn't receive those dollars in their grant contract. So no, not a requirement. You just tie to
Unless they
dollars.
want the money.
Unless they want the money, which is the incentive.
Well, the only thing that would limit it is that your boards or your mayors and council don't say, let's get it done. That's the only thing that would limit it, really, as far as I'm concerned. It's up to the local governments to insist, tell the designate who's gonna do it and do it. Right, Mr. Mayor?
I was just trying to envision if there needs to be language that if it's the Met Council's fault that it passes the deadline, they're okay, I don't know.
We would consider, if you have a complete plan by the end of that deadline, whatever that ends up being, say June 30th of 2020, if they had a complete plan determination by then, they would receive the grant.
I'd just say, I applaud you, it's innovative, we'll find out if it works. I say go for it.
Good luck with that. Yeah, that's the translation. Good luck.
Angela, I'm gonna ask a question to answer your question.
Okay.
How are you going to start utilizing AI in some of this work versus making it all manual the way we have been? I mean, I know that every company has their own ways and limits on AI, but how could this push this so that you can have AI maybe look at the document before you do your deep review to maybe give you some suggestions on what maybe needs to be changed or how that may be changed?
As a public agency, I know that we have to have kind of standards in place if we're going to use AI, and I know that our IS departments are working on that with kind of consultation with the other divisions within the council right now. So I don't have a plan for that right now, Kathy. However, I think that we're open to doing some of those things to make our process efficient, but we would have to have one instruction and two standards, and a lot of the work for comprehensive plans, which is why it is such a labor-intensive process, is that it takes a professional judgment in order for us to make a determination. So, or sometimes it's negotiations with the local government as well. And so a lot of decisions aren't as easy as yes or no. It would be easy, did they submit their resolution? Did they do their adjacent community review? Did they meet their planning commission meeting? Did they hold a public hearing? Like those are things that it would be easy for that kind of a, it's not subjective. And while we try not to make subjective decisions because we want to provide as much consistency as possible. Oh, we're running over, sorry, Bella saw that. We try to provide as much consistency as possible. We also want to be careful with our system.
Exactly. But I just wondered if that has been thought through as we start submitting some of these.
And Chair, I would just ask for your direction. Do you want me to continue or do you want us to bring this part of the conversation back for the next meeting? These items that we are discussing as far as the incentive programs and the funding considerations with the overall budget and the programmatic needs are not part of the business item that we would be asking committee members to take a vote on. And so these part of the conversation could be brought back without hindering that forward progress that we were hoping for.
I'll just ask the committee if you feel comfortable enough to stay, or if you just want this to be part of the next meeting that we have. I just wanna make sure and respect everybody's time.
I can stay, but I wonder if the data you're getting at the end of the month on the tax updates might actually frame a different financial position.
Could be. We would update it if that was.
I would like to dig into the next item on your list here, so I think maybe carrying this over to the next meeting would make sense.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want
I
to
think so
push this
too.
way
That way
over.
we get time to
Yeah.
deep dive.
Yeah.
Sounds good?
We'll have that deeper discussion and we'll allow in our next meeting plenty of time for this agenda. Okay,
That sounds
then I
good.
will defer to the chair.
If there's no further questions or conversations, then this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all, I really appreciate it.